Hi, I'm Dr. Kimberly Moore, host of the Envision More Workforce Insight podcast. Join us as we explore workforce and leadership through an innovation lens with leaders from across the country in every industry. Whether you're in education trying to crack the code for workforce or industry seeking to address your workforce talent strategy, or maybe you just need to be inspired, we've got you covered. Tune in, save us as a favorite, and let's innovate together. Welcome to another episode of Workforce Insights, brought to you by Envision More Consulting Group, where we bring your bold visions to life. I am excited to have an amazing guest with me today. We talk about the whole focus of working with, whether it's education, nonprofit, private industry, and government, that there's an intersection there, and that the conversations about workforce development and identifying talent and creating those talent pipelines and just figuring out innovatively what people are doing across the country. Well, I have an absolute treat. I have landed on none other than Mike Ramsey. And Michael for you all, Mike because I've known him for some time, but who is doing an amazing effort there in San Antonio. I will not spill the beans. I absolutely want him to be able to share that. But when you think about great work underway throughout our country and looking at ways to ensure that there's a level playing field for all, here is where you want to save and share and like this podcast, because it definitely is something that you want to add to your playbook. So, Mike, it's so great to have you here, and I want to make sure that our listeners get some understanding of how this all started, because you didn't just land in San Antonio. So before talking about what's going on there, could you share a bit about your journey in workforce development and what inspired you to take on this pivotal role there in the city of San Antonio?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here, Dr. Kimberly Moore. I'm going to call you Kimberly from this point forward. I want to give you your flowers and your respect because you earned those credentials in the front of your name, Dr. Moore. So for me, my background, so I'm a military vet, U.S. Navy. I was a machinist mate, enlisted individual, so I was a working person inside of the U.S. military. So I kind of cut my teeth there in what a workforce development training program is, because as the military has kind of mastered this concept of assessing individuals on the front end, figuring out what their aptitude is and which occupations they're going to be most suited for, and then providing the training from entry level, knowing absolutely nothing, to being extremely proficient. So that was probably my first intro into workforce development without even actually knowing it. After I got out of the military, my first real job was as a teacher. So I was a science teacher in Tampa, Florida, which is, my second home. I'm originally from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I'll circle back to that a little bit later. But in my role as an educator, transitioning from the military, never having taught before, like stepping into, the classroom and trying to figure out, how do I master this craft? You have to learn from others. So, yes. As a science teacher, one of the things that I was impressed upon me in my first year as a teacher is that, hey, you've got to learn from the people that have done this already, because, kids either love science or they hate it. So something that for me that would have been an inconvenience for most wound up being the best thing, the best blessing ever happened to me in my educational career. I had to float from one classroom to the next with my little card of all my little science experiment stuff. But they strategically placed me into the classroom of three of the best, most experienced teachers at the high school, right? So I was getting really an apprenticeship model, being the tool that was utilized to help me to develop my skills as an educator. So I had to go through this process to where they would evaluate me and watch me teach. And at first I was like, man, why are they still in here? Why do they watch me teach? But then I realized, man, they're actually giving me some great nuggets, some great tools that I can use to become a better teacher. So those master teachers helping the apprentice to kind of understand the tools of the craft in order to better improve the outcomes for those students I was charged to teaching with. So It took them being willing to do it because there was no formal agreement, no formal
Yeah.
process. They weren't getting a stipend or anything. They were just doing it because it was the right thing to do. And then
Yeah.
me being receptive to their feedback was essential to my growth and development. So again, another tidbit of workforce development and apprenticeships that was kind of something that I picked up later on, like, man, that model really does
You're
work for
like,
my
that's what
personal
that is.
firsthand
That's what I went
experience.
through.
Yeah. And then from there, some of my leaders saw some potential in me and they encouraged me to pursue my master's degree and become an assistant principal. So I became an assistant principal at a high school there in Tampa called Tampa Bay Technical High School, which was a phenomenal school because every student there was on a traditional degree pathway, college bound pathway, but they were also learning a trade at the
Oh,
same
wow.
time. 2 periods out of the day, they were learning welding or learning electricity or licensed practical nursing or computer user support, and
Yeah.
every student was chose a pathway and went down that road. So again, it's a theme here,
Yeah.
Kimberly. Workforce development
You're
has kind of
walking
been
into your
ingrained
destiny.
in
Yeah.
every single step of my career path. Right. So then it's like, man, I see why K-12 career technical education programs are so important to a local workforce development ecosystem because
Yeah.
the majority of those students, little known fact, are not going to graduate with a 4-year degree. So they've
Correct.
got to have some skills, some certifications in their back pocket so that they can not be stuck in a dead end job, but actually be into a career path that can help them to take care of themselves and their families with down the road. So then from there, I know I'm taking too long to give
No,
you my
no, no.
background.
This
So we can
this is
count this
good
out later.
because no, our listeners want to understand the journey because I think that they'll appreciate how you arrived in San Antonio and all the preparation that went into that. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. I'm gonna keep going then since you ain't stopping. All right. So then from there, after being assistant principal at this technical high school, I became a principal with Florida Virtual School, and I
Oh,
got immersed into the world of online learning and how you don't have to physically be in the same space to transfer knowledge and information, which everybody was immersed into during COVID. But as
yes.
you know, the state of Florida had been wrapping their brains around that for over 20 years at that point in
Yeah.
time. So that is also another critical component of workforce development instruction is being able to transfer knowledge over space and distance without having to physically be in that same area. And my doggone light just clicked off. So let me know if I'm too dark. Um, then from there, from Florida Virtual School, I came back into Hillsborough County as a district level curriculum supervisor for industrial and technology education. So I told you I was a Navy guy, machinist mate. So I had a little bit of
Yeah.
a background, hands on, in that realm. But as a curriculum supervisor in CTE, industrial technology ed, I
Yeah.
was overseeing curriculum for everything from information technology to
Oh my
automotive
goodness.
repair to welding. I'm not an expert in all those areas, but I was a former teacher, so I know who the experts are, the instructors
Exactly.
and the employers on their advisory boards who know
Yeah.
exactly what they need. So I was, sharp enough to realize I need to lean on these guys who've been teaching this, material for years and the employers who are going to be the end customer, the recipient of that talent
Yeah.
to help to make sure that our curriculum was designed and aligned exactly to what those employers needs in a way that the instructors can deliver it to the students in a meaningful way. So I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, y'all, come on in. Like, I'm not. I want to pretend like I know it all. Y'all come in and show me and teach me, how we can design this curriculum and align it in the way that's going to meet everybody's needs. So from there, I moved up in the district office. I oversaw all of career technical and adult education programs for all of our middle schoolers, over 70,000 students for career exploration and exposure. Our high school students, industry certifications again across the board were huge.
Wow.
Trying to ensure that all of our students again had tools in their toolboxes that if they didn't make it through college, they had something to fall back on, as well as our adult education programs. We know that GED is
Yes.
essential for people who didn't get the high school diploma, the traditional route, as well as for technical colleges, that middle space between the community college and high school, where if an adult realizes, man, all right, it's been 5, 6, 7 years since I graduated from high school. I'm starting to start a family now. I need to make more money. I can go back and become an automotive tech. I can go back and become a welder. I can go back into that technical college, get access to those federal financial aid dollars if the program was of a certain length and scope to help subsidize me getting the
Yeah.
skills, getting the certifications I need to get onto a career pathway and not just have a job. So from there, I'm almost done,
No,
Kimberly.
no,
I
no.
went over to St. Petersburg College as a dean of workforce development, trying to connect all of the degree pathways and non-degree pathways to employers and make sure that all of our students, whether they're degree seeking or not, were in line to get a good family sustaining job at the end of their training or educational pathways. And then the city of San Antonio. So the city of San Antonio came calling because they had this huge initiative that they were launching, they were starting up to help again to educate and train their community members who were underskilled or underemployed or unemployed to get access to high quality jobs. And it's a phenomenal initiative, and it is one of the most pivotal things I think I've ever done in my life is to immerse myself into this work because of the difference and the impact that it's going to make on those individuals and our community as a whole.
So you have shared with our listeners a passionate and certainly I call it an environment where you were learning and growing at the same time, but you get to apply everything that you learned in the process and the principles around it in this current role, which makes you a very unique person to fill this spot because you have lived it at all levels, both on the side of being a recipient and then overseeing these programs in the state of Florida and a variety of different spaces. So, talk to me because I want the listeners to just understand yes, I am excited about San Antonio Ready to Work program, but it's bigger than that because this project, when you think about our nation, how large is it? Is it one of the largest ones in the country when you think about investment? Give the listeners some idea of just how big this effort is investment wise.
So, Kimberly, it is the largest financial investment that any local municipality has ever made in workforce development in the history of the country. There's not
Wow.
been an investment this large ever by a local municipality in its most precious asset, its
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
That human capital now is becoming the most important thing as it relates to economic development in local
Yeah.
communities. Because as you're looking to attract new business to your community,
Hmm.
what's the first question they ask? Where am I going to find my workforce? Where's my
Where's the
talent going to
talent
come
for
from?
today and tomorrow? Yeah. Hmm.
Bingo. The employers who are already here, when they're looking to grow and expand their businesses, they've got to have access to high quality talent. And it doesn't just happen at the snap of a finger or overnight or quick. You have to be very strategic in making sure that you've developed pipelines and
Yeah.
pathways with multiple on ramps and multiple off ramps to
Yeah.
catch people wherever they're at to make sure that they're constantly able to access resources in order to
Right.
improve their skills and move forward. So we're attacking this as a community here in San Antonio.
Yeah.
So I get the wonderful privilege of spearheading and leading this work, but it is the partners that are actually making the magic happen. We've got our local workforce board.
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that if you're going to do anything significant in the realm of workforce development in a community, you've got to have the structure, the consistency of funding, the infrastructure that is provided by the local workforce board and is funded and powered through WIOA and other funding sources that they're able to tap into. So they're one of our key partners in doing this work. And if you're going to do it, educating and training people, you got to have the community college at the
Yeah.
core and at the center of that. So we have the privilege of working with Alamo College's nationally
Yes.
award-winning community college district here in the city of San Antonio, and they are boots on the ground, leaning
Yeah.
in, not just dealing with the traditional college-going population, but are also working with those individuals who may have never set foot on a college campus
Yes.
before, providing the coaching and wraparound support that they need to be successful in those short-term training programs that
Yes.
can articulate and transition into degree programs. Because remember, it's a continual cycle. It never ends. There's just different on-ramps and different off-ramps for people along the way. Along with some phenomenal nonprofits like Project Quest, who's been working in partnership with the city in workforce development for over 30 years now. And they
Wow.
started when we had a Levi Strauss plant here that closed down. And there was a lot of single Hispanic women that lost their jobs. So they stepped up and said, we're going to help these folks. The mayor at the time, some of our major employers got together and said, we're going to help to fund their education and training so that we can get them back on track and so they can take care of themselves and their families. So this large investment, over $240 million
Right.
is what the investment is. We expect to run and operate this program, at a pace, at a scale that no municipality has seen before, and it's only happening because of the diligence and the creativity of our partners.
I love that the whole commitment behind the work that's underway in San Antonio is about elevating not just one group or sector, but an entire community where all hands on deck, it matters. And it's not just something that you all are saying and just, but you all are really walking the walk. And that's powerful because a lot of communities, we all agree, I mean, nationwide, that establishing talent pipelines, making sure that we know that we're going to have a ready workforce for the today and certainly for the future. It's critical, but how to do that? And I love when I was researching the work that you all are doing, that you all are one taking on a collaborative approach, but you're also not just looking at this as a short term focus. It's long term. It's long
Yeah.
term and long range. So really putting the structure in place. So, what would you say outside of what we know as a given that people or get the skills that they need and go into work? But what are there other key objectives that you all have defined for the Ready to Work program?
Absolutely. So we have some very high level, high bar goals that we wish to achieve through Ready to Work. So getting 28,800 people enrolled into education and training programs,
Wow.
having 70% of that 28,000 successfully complete those education and training programs, and having 80% of those individuals, or 15,600, get placed into quality jobs right here in the San
I love it.
Antonio community. So the bar is set very high intentionally. As somebody said, man, you guys are pretty unreasonable with those expectations y'all have over the city. Yes, we do, because we have, serious, poverty issues here in the city that we have got to step our games up
Yeah.
collectively.
Yeah.
Not, one entity having to figure out this all on their own, but we want to raise the bar for our entire community as a whole. And that's going to take community-based organizations, wraparound supports, employers, changing the way that they view how they recruit and hire from
Yes.
different segments of our population. All of those things have to work together in order to achieve those lofty goals that we have set for ourselves within this program. But we are making strides. Just this past week, we had our 1,000th person get placed in a quality job
This
here
is
in San
great.
Antonio. And we've enrolled in training over 7,200 people in a 2-year time frame.
Yeah.
And they're on their way. They're on their way to fulfilling their goals of getting a better jobs so they can take care again of themselves and their families.
Well, it's breaking a cycle, but at the same time, when I think about economic development and making sure that they have an available, I call it product to sell, and we know the economic development game is about having a ready workforce. You all will be at the front of the bus on that because you all are mastering that now. What are, because as exciting as this sounds and it's amazing, what are some of the challenges communities can face from your vantage point when implementing these large scale workforce initiatives, and how have you navigated them?
Kimberly, the challenges are plentiful. In
Yeah.
workforce development in general, there's lots of
Right.
challenges because you're dealing with people, right? And anytime you're dealing with people, it is a soft science, it is not a hard science, because
Right.
every person has a different set of variables that are going to be indicators of success.
Yeah.
And in workforce development, you got to figure out which interventions to implement at the right time in that
Right.
person's journey to achieve the desired outcome. Then you've got the employers and their fluctuations in demand, and you're trying to find that balance between the
Right.
infusion of skills and the demands of the employers and make that mesh. So in doing this work, just in general, is tough. And I tell people that all the time. Workforce development is not for the faint of heart. It
Right.
is challenging, tough work, and sometimes you don't see, the outcomes happen, as quickly as you can pop a microwave dinner into the microwave. It takes time.
Right.
So scale. If you're going to truly make impact in your community, the the most challenging thing to do is to scale successful best practices. Because if I've got a phenomenal coach and I'm only training a dozen or 2 dozen people, man, that one phenomenal magical coach that can
Yeah.
make that human connection and just inspire people and keep them motivated, because that's half the battle right there when
Yes.
you're trying to serve people in the community who have not found success either in school or in the
Right.
workplace. You've got to build them up.
Right.
So It takes the right type of mindset of that case manager or coach working with that person to keep them motivated to kind of be that person that when times get tough and they got to find somebody to watch the kids, or
Right.
they didn't do well on the test, to get them to get back up, dust themselves off, and keep on moving forward. You got to have the right people in place at scale. So how do I capture that magic
Yeah.
that I can do, with I only got a couple of dozen people and I got a phenomenal coach
Yeah.
and I got a phenomenal instructor that's making that, person keep going. How do I multiply that, across hundreds of coaches and case managers? So that, it takes intentionality, it takes training, it takes quality control, it takes
Yes.
intentionality of keeping that bar high of what your expectations are, what those participant coach interactions are going to look like. It also takes scale of employers. We have over 425 employers here locally that have pledged their support of the Ready to Work initiative. That includes telling us what they need, which
Yeah.
is a lot, sometimes a little more difficult than you think,
Yeah.
and then also hiring these people who are rearranging their lives to better themselves,
Yeah.
and they want to be well received by our local employer community. So over 425 local employers have committed to hiring and informing the Ready to Work participants as we roll through this program. So scale is a huge challenge. Alignment, I spoke on a little bit about,
Yeah.
between the demand of the employers and the talent that's coming out of the pipeline, and the skills that those individuals are being equipped with. Ego. Anytime
Yes.
you got to deal with multiple organizations, like,
Yeah.
everybody has some level of ego.
Right.
Everybody has a board. Everybody has a group that they got to show outcomes to.
Right.
So sometimes you gotta, disagree. That, all right, everybody, we're gonna place who's getting credit in the background, and we're
Yeah.
just gonna focus on the people and the businesses that we've got to serve. Like, we want them to shine. Our organizations will shine naturally if we produce the right outcomes. So
Right.
we have to all agree to sit the egos to the back, because and to do something at this scale, it's got to be collaborative. And the quickest way to end collaboration is to let ego get in the way. So you
Right.
got to sit them on the back burner. And then community input. You've
Right.
got to get the whole community engaged and involved. So that means lots of information sessions, talking to all the chambers, going to all of the trade and industry organization group meetings, going to community-based organizations, neighborhood associations, anywhere that people are gathering, getting their input, because everybody's got something to add that you'll be able to
Absolutely.
utilize in order to make continuous improvement happen. Because that's the other thing, you got to continuously innovate and improve. Because again, there's so many variables that are out there. You got to be willing to take on new data, take on new information, and then quickly adjust and adapt in order to achieve the desired outcomes. And you may get that information, those data points, from a source that you never expected to grab it from. But it's that thing that allows you to actually be successful versus spinning your wheels and not getting to where you need to be. One of the things that we have to always take a step back and slow down and do, even somebody who has done this for so long and has some of the experiences I have, is listen to the people that you're trying to help. Like,
Yes.
they know what the barriers are better than anybody,
Yeah.
right? So they're living it every day. They develop some extremely proficient resiliency skills to be able
Right.
to stretch the dollars they do have coming in the way they do. Kimberly, the median household, for the whole household income of the participants coming into the Ready to
Right.
Work program is just over $15,000 a year
Oh
for the
wow.
whole household. I told you earlier that 1,000 people have gotten jobs.
Yeah.
Well, that 1,000 people's the average income is $44,000 a year. So
Oh
they're
wow.
nearly tripling their
Yes.
household income just for that one individual getting through the program, getting connected to employment. That is transformational for their individuals and their families. 65% of our program participants are women. The majority of them, Hispanic single moms. So you're talking about now changing the family as these women of color begin, to acquire the skills necessary to take care of their kids. Their educational outcomes statistically are going to improve
Yeah.
because now their basic needs are being met. That's a truly transformational impact that this work is having and is going to continue to have on San Antonio and its residents. So I get extremely passionate about it because I understand how important that is. Because I told them from Baton Rouge. I grew up in an area of North Baton Rouge that is on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum.
Right.
And the one thing that you see with your friends, your family members, your cousins, and I wish there was something there to help them, right?
Yes.
They didn't go to college. they're stuck in a job where they can only get so far. If there was only somebody there to help to pay for some of these CDL programs,
Right.
help pay for me to go get my nursing license, like if there was something there in place to help them to get over that financial hump and then provide the wraparound supports. Hey, I need clothes to go to the interview. I need to make sure I've got the boots I need to go to this construction training program. I need a bus pass to get back
Right.
and forth. I need childcare assistance. My light's about to get cut off this week. Can
Yeah.
y'all help me cover my light bill? Ready to Work is set up to where we've got funding available to help to cover some of those unexpected expenses. My car broke down. I can't get to class. We
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
I'm having trouble making rent this month. We got you. Like all of the things that can come up in individual lives, our partners are working with us to make sure that if we don't have the funding readily available, there's another community-based organization that does, that we can get you connected to in order to help you to get to where you need to be. We're a part of something called the Alamo Area Community Network, which is a group of nonprofits providing all types of different services that we're able to refer individuals to, whether it's substance abuse, domestic violence issues. You need to get your high school equivalency. We got funding for that if you didn't get that high school diploma to kind of help you to get on your way. So those are some of the challenges that you'll face in having to do this. You have to be willing to innovate and shift and adjust and have thick skin because you're not going to get everything perfect. There's going to be pitfalls along the way. And, there's going to be people that are critical of the work. That's okay. I take every piece of criticism as a gift because now I can work to continuously improve and
Right.
make the program better in those areas.
Well, I think what you have done for our listeners is really give them insight regarding the challenges, but at the same time, also shared how you are working to combat and address those areas of opportunity. And I think the biggest thing that you have pointed out that the community, San Antonio, the city,
Yeah.
understands its why and that you all are getting behind that why. And because you've done that, you've been able to experience what these families, again, going from 15,000 to now, going looking at 45,000 or so for their household, is really life changing, generation changing, and community changing at the same time. I mean, because I think about the social ills that sometimes go along with when people don't have the
Yeah.
fact that you all are supporting individuals in a holistic way, the whole person. I mean, that's powerful because it's not just put people in a seat for training. There are other
Yeah.
things that impact their life. So I'm thinking about everything that you've said, and I know listeners are figuring out what, or at least inquiring. They're like, man, how did they determine that this large, monumental, largest one in the nation investment would be made? So that means that it probably went to the voters.
Yep.
So the Ready to Work program, so it received, as I understand, a significant support from voters. What do you think contributed to this overwhelming approval?
Kimberly, 77% of the voters said that yes, this would be a good use of our tax dollars to
Wow.
support workforce development. 77%. So I gotta take you back in time to help you to understand why. So 2020,
Uh-huh.
pandemic hit, right? San Antonio is the most visited city in the state of Texas. Little known fact.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
Um, when people stopped traveling, people stopped going to hotels.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't go out
Everybody
to
felt it.
restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
Those people were no longer working, no longer able to take care of themselves and their families.
Yeah.
So what happened was um, the food bank lines here in San Antonio made the national news.
Oh my
It was on the
goodness.
cover of the New York Times. I'm not talking about like a little line, like
Yeah.
miles and miles of cars
Wow.
lined up to get food, that basic necessity,
Yeah.
so that they and their families can survive, right? So that image, that New York Times headline, that knowledge that your neighbors, your family members, your aunts, your parents, your grandparents weren't able to take care of themselves because of fragility
Yeah.
that had existed in their economic and financial situations.
Yeah.
So that didn't just happen because of the pandemic. It was magnified by the
Yeah.
pandemic. You have people that were living on the edge, one paycheck away from disaster, and then disaster hit, and we saw it. So
Yeah.
then the city of San Antonio said, you know what? We've been dealing with economic disparity for a long time. We are the seventh largest city in the country,
Yeah.
and we have one of the highest poverty rates of all the major cities. We've got
Wow.
to do something about that. When you're a city that is majority minority city, 70+% people of color here in San Antonio, and you
Yeah.
think about some of the systemic things historically, like redlining, that have kept individuals from home ownership
Right.
and generating wealth through ownership, you have to think about, well, how are we going to be intentional about reversing some of that impact? How are we going to be intentional about creating that opportunity for people? They've got to put the work in, but
Right.
we're going to create a system to where they can plug into, that they can get the support that they need to get
Yeah.
to where they need to be, to get a better job, to be attractive, a good, quality candidate for our employers. We don't want our employers to lower their bars.
Yeah.
No, we want the people's skills and their aptitude and ability to rise up to the standard that employers need so they can grow and thrive in their businesses. So I think that backdrop of the pandemic kind of exposing something that had already been right there in the underbelly. People were, just one paycheck away
Yeah.
from utter disaster, was the motivating factor that caused the voters to come out and support Ready to Work in the way that they did.
So, listeners, again, gleaning from this, the pandemic, everybody knew somebody that was impacted. It was no longer something that was isolated. And then I think the other piece of this is just, how you all were able to come together because, again, to take the pressure off one place, they didn't have jobs. It added the pressure I'm thinking about to our nonprofits. They're usually the safety
Yeah.
nets for your
Yeah.
community, and the fact that they then did not have the wherewithal or resources to be able to support it. So I get it, the all in mentality. And listeners, I know that we have global listeners now as well. So please do, this is a story that's worth listening to and sharing about how you can effectively do it. You have to have a starting point, and this is a great starting point that they have underway in San Antonio.
And Dr.
Mike,
Moore, let me make
sure,
sure I clarify this point too. It
sure.
wasn't a new sales tax. It was
Okay.
a tax that was set to expire.
Oh, okay.
And we were going to shift it, to help our transportation system, because we know public transportation is always a great need in all of our major cities.
Yes.
So we're still going to do that. We just delayed it so that we can get the Ready to Work program off the ground and collect the tax over a 4-year time period. It'll equate again to about $240 million, and then that existing tax will shift over to via our local transportation system.
I love that. And having been a chamber president in a prior life, I know that businesses and others are like, they are like, whew, a sigh of relief because nobody likes new taxes. So
Nope.
this was a redirection. This was something that
Correct.
already existed. So want
You
to make
got it.
sure you're listening to that as well, because those that are maybe serving in an elected role, you're like, I'll never get reelected on that.
Yep.
No, this existed. This was making priority. So this was
Yep.
making workforce a priority. That's what it was. So, Mike, tell me about, because you mentioned there are 400 plus employers that have committed to support the Ready to Work program. What types of industry are we talking about with those
Uh,
employers?
manu- Manufacturing. We have some large employers that have committed to us, including JCB, who recently announced that they're building a manufacturing facility
Wow.
here in San Antonio, going to employ 1,500 individuals, building heavy equipment. We've got the likes of Navistar, Toyota, who has a
She
huge
whiz.
campus manufacturing plant here in the San Antonio area. And we're very, very lucky to have that type of support
Yeah.
from those large manufacturing entities here. San Antonio, financial services, Frost Bank, USAA,
Just across
Bank
the
of
board.
America, across the board, Accenture
Yeah.
Federal Services in the consultant space. We've got the I'm sorry, IT sector employers. Really, it's a conglomerate of all of the key major employers, including the mid-sized and small employers here
Yeah.
in San Antonio, because it's going to take again the entire community in order
Yes.
to achieve the goals that we have set. So we take everyone, small size businesses
Small, medium, and
employ.
large, and even the new
Yep,
ones that's coming into the city. I love it.
yep, and no
So,
doubt about it,
Mike,
including the city,
and the
because
city.
municipalities are large employers, right?
Yes.
So we employ 14,000 people here at the city of San Antonio. So we want to make sure that we're leading the way and ensuring that we're setting that example of putting our money where our mouth is, so to speak,
Yes.
and leading the way in hiring Ready to Work participants.
I love it. And Mike, when I think about you as a leader in workforce development, what do you see as the most pressing opportunities for innovation and growth in this field? And so I'm thinking about workforce development because you've taken on something that, I mean, you really are leading the way on this because it hasn't happened before. But what do you think are some of the pressing opportunities for innovation and growth in the field, particularly when you think about San Antonio?
I'm gonna tell you something, and it's gonna be like, man, Mike, that ain't new, that ain't innovative, but apprenticeships. I think
Yeah,
apprenticeships, they're
yeah,
the oldest form of workforce development, but
yeah.
here in our major cities, they haven't, I don't believe, been giving the amount of attention that they need to have,
Right.
because they're so perfect for people who have to keep having a check coming in
Exactly.
while they're learning and growing.
Learn while you learn. Yeah.
Yes, and the
Yeah.
employers, you get a chance to truly have an employer-led workforce development initiative because you're designing the training, you're giving the training in many cases, you're providing the training
Yeah.
tailored exactly to what you need. So
Right.
I think the innovative thing is a blast from the past
Yeah.
in getting companies and organizations in the community to embrace the apprenticeship model as a core piece of their workforce development strategy, and not just in the traditional area like the skilled trades, but also in healthcare, in
Yes.
IT, in finance and banking, in education. Communities across the country are having teacher shortages now. Well,
Yeah.
what's the best way to combat that? Grow your own. Start
Grow your
apprenticeship
own.
training programs so that you can make sure you've got a steady flow of people flowing through that pipeline. I think also as it relates to AI, it's here.
Yes.
I used to say AI is coming. AI is here. We've got
It's
to
upon
leverage. We got to leverage it in a couple of different ways. For workforce development programs, helping to identify, the right tracks, the right jobs, the right pathways, their interests, that connectivity. There's algorithms, you at use at play right now that can be a very much so assistance in making sure the proper alignment is there for people in the right pathways. So leveraging that, utilizing the training tools that are available to make sure that people have a very broad general understanding of how to
Mhm.
apply AI into the workplace, because AI is going to impact over 70% of all jobs by the year 2030. So it's not going to take them away, but you better know how to utilize it to be more
Exactly.
productive and more efficient, or you're going to get left behind. So we have to make sure that we're leveraging the existing workforce and helping them to be infused with the proper skills so they can continue to keep their job and continue to grow within their job while learning how to use AI in a productive manner. I think that for in San Antonio, I talked about manufacturing, and so much is happening in that space. I think we've got to, figure out, how to leverage the bipartisan infrastructure law, the CHIPS Act, Inflation Reduction Acts, and all those federal dollars that are flowing in from the
Yes.
federal projects. There's a lot of them coming to Texas, a lot of them coming to San Antonio. Clean energy is, people don't think of Texas, they think of oil
Right.
and natural gas, but Texas is one of the leading providers of clean energy in the country, and San Antonio is right up there in that
Yeah.
space. Our local utility company is very invested in those clean energy resources and utilizing them to support our grid. So we've got to continue to infuse talent that's able to handle that expansion so
Mhm.
we continue to grow in those areas.
So you've said some powerful things because again, you're right. Apprenticeships, it sounds like blast from the past, but across the country. And when thinking about how to create talent in a productive way to earn while you learn, oh my gosh, it is. It is one of the top sellers. So employers that are listening, and if you haven't included that as part of your portfolio, please, and especially if you're in Texas, make sure that you are tuning in and sharing this because it's some sage advice on how you can grow your own talent. And I would submit to you that that will have to be the, I call it method of, or practice from this point going forward, thinking about how do you grow your own talent and
Yeah.
not just waiting for it to knock at your door. It's not going to happen. It's just not set up for that anymore. Mike, what do you think about? Because again, you're in a unique role and such a great spot when I think about the role that government is playing with this effort. So, how do you envision the role of government driving workforce and economic development initiatives? Because so oftentimes this, government can be seen as a collaborative partner in partnership with chambers economic development. You all are doing that, but you all are. It's where the investment is being made and driving it in partnership. What would you say about the role of government and how those that are, I call it leading the way, your commissioners or councilmen or whomever you might have, um, how important is the role that they have in driving this?
They have a very important role because it's the constituents that the elected officials
Yeah,
represent that are ultimate beneficiary in this investment in human capital.
yeah,
And you know, whether the city or the county or whoever the governmental entity is, whether they're funding it or not,
yeah,
number one, they can be a convener.
yeah.
There's
Yes.
nothing like using the bully pulpit that an elected official has to pull people together,
Mhm.
right? So if the mayor picks up the phone and calls any CEO in this city, they're going to pick up and they're going to
Yeah,
listen to what he has to say. And if you ask them to come to a meeting to talk about something that's going to directly benefit them as an employer, they're very likely to show up. So I think that communities, the business communities, the chambers, workforce development boards, trade, labor organizations, it is imperative that they partner with their local officials to help to get the right people into the room. Because sometimes that's half of the battle.
yeah,
You have to have industry at the table in workforce development, or you're just training and doing education. You're not doing true
yeah,
workforce development. So you got to have the influencers to get them to the table so they'll listen and be receptive and then act upon what you agree upon in that room. And then also, even though you don't always have the fund, if
yeah.
you got some money to contribute to initiatives that are important to your community, invest in them, make it a priority. It's not that all of these partners that we're working with weren't already doing great work in the community, but the dollars that the city's investing accelerates and enhances that work. Now you can do
Yes,
more at a deeper level, provide more
yes,
resources. So if you can fund workforce development activities, man, that is an accelerant like no other in helping things to get done in your community. And you accelerate those things that are going to make the most impact. Like I talked about apprenticeships, and I talked about incumbent worker trainings, increasing the
yes,
skills of workers that are already in existence, and on the job training. And I love the workforce boards, but people think government in general is a bureaucratic, red tape,
right.
kind of entity. What we're trying to do is to help to eliminate some of the that perception
Right.
by in reality making it easier to access dollars, more streamlined way. We
Yes,
still have accountability, but we want to make it more painless for employers to do
yes,
the right thing and upskill their existing workforce and their new workers through on-the-job training programs. Not to take away from the federal programs that are out there, but to enhance and allow the opportunity for more of them to exist within the community. Especially within those areas that are important to the economic development of the
mm,
community. Because workforce development and economic development go hand in hand.
hand in hand.
You
Yeah,
cannot have one without the other. And if you're very strategic in how you align your workforce investments with your economic development strategies and initiatives,
mhm,
you can get pretty doggone far and you can help both the businesses and the people, which is you need both. The
yes,
businesses need skilled talent, and skilled workforce. The community needs businesses to grow and expand so they can provide more jobs for those individuals who are in your community. So you have to walk that fine line. And Kimberly, sometimes you don't make everybody happy because everybody's got strong opinions on both sides
right.
of that equation. But you got to walk that fine line in the middle to make sure that everybody's needs are being met. And from a political perspective, whether you're red or you're blue, everybody's in favor of people getting education and skills so they can get good jobs, so they can take care of themselves and their families.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't go wrong with that agenda item on your platform. So I have to ask you because I know the listeners are curious about probably the most sage advice that you've received, either while you've been in this role, transformative kind of role, or before that you use absolutely in how you carry out your leadership. So, what's that best advice?
Listen, you got to listen. Listen to the employers, listen to the community, listen to your elected officials, listen to the education and training providers, because you have to listen in order to find that place of understanding so you can
Right.
effectively collaborate. Everybody's heard that old proverb that, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And to do this work effectively, you got to have a team because
Yeah.
no one entity has it all. So you've
No.
got to be able to keep people connected. And the best way to do that is to make sure that they feel heard, they feel valued, and that you're going to take action and deliver on what you say. Like if you can do those things, then you can keep a collaborative group together, and then
Right.
collectively you can do so much more than you're doing by yourself.
I love that. Underscoring listeners, listen, 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 and more listening is what
Yeah.
is the secret sauce that Mr. Ramsey is sharing with us today. So, leading up to the final question and looking ahead in that crystal ball, what do you hope will be the lasting legacy and impact of the Ready to Work program on the residents and economy of San Antonio?
Man, that's a great question, Kimberly. Already in this short time that this program has been around, we've started taking our first participants in May this year
Yes.
of 2022. So 2 years now we've been up and going, and we had a local economist, Dr. Stephen Niven, do a economic impact
Yeah.
study on the first year of the program. And for every dollar invested by the city, there is a $61 return on that
Oh,
dollar,
wow.
equating to a 1.7 billion with a B
Wow.
dollar impact on our community over the work life of those participants who've been impacted. That's their increased spending in the economy, their increased earnings, and their decreased usage of benefits
Yeah.
that the community would have to provide. For instance, there is an individual, Andres. I won't give you his last name, but he's a dad, and his he was unemployed. Had a 1 month old baby. His child's mother was unemployed when he came into the program. Got a CDL license. Is now making $66,000 a year as a result of the support that was provided to him by Ready to Work. And if we weren't there, this young man would still be struggling right now.
Yeah.
So those individual stories, those individual families being impacted, I talked about the macro level, the
Yeah.
economic impact on the community, but it's really all about the people and them being in a better situation to take care of themselves and their families. So I talked about us and the poverty rate and the economic disparity that exists here in our community. I want to see that trend start to shift. Like we know that, poverty is a Goliath of a problem and a challenge in all of our major cities. And there's pockets of it everywhere throughout the country. Um, for our community, our elected officials, our Mayor Ron Nierenberg, who's the biggest champion for workforce development that I've ever seen from an elected official locally, he is out front leading this
Right.
thing. And to attack an issue like poverty
Yes.
that, is so challenging. It is so difficult to move the needle on and to
Yeah.
invest the resources, into, something that, others, don't have the fortitude to come up against. I
Yeah.
think is one of the key pieces that provides the win behind the sales of an initiative like Ready to Work, that's truly helping some of the most in need community members to get their footing and to be able to have that economic financial stability that we all need, that we all crave. And so that long-term impact, our partners all working together who are charged to do this work in the community, the workforce board, the community college, the nonprofits, all working in synergy, relying on each other's strengths, not competing, but
Yes.
complementing one another in a common goal to fight poverty. Our employers being the end customer beneficiary of this influx of local talent as our educational attainment rate rises, them
Yes.
being able to grow and expand their businesses. So as they continue to grow and prosper, our whole community can prosper. We've all
Yes.
heard that phrase, as the tide rises, all boats rises. And we're
Absolutely.
emphasizing that all here in San Antonio. We don't want to leave behind any pockets of our community. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to benefit.
I love that. I love the emphasis on all the different individuals and stakeholders that had to step up to one shed a light and probably a bigger light than ever before on why it was needed, that something needed to happen, and that everybody's joining forces behind it. I think probably what's even more powerful though is all the different stories, all the different people that whose
Yeah.
lives would never have changed were it not for the work that you all are doing now. So I personally want to thank the city of San Antonio, all of the leaders, everyone that's bought into this, and for you, stepping up to the plate to be that
Okay.
inaugural leader of making a difference and doing it in a way. And I certainly understand that, hey, when you're the first to do it, then yes, you got the magnifying glass. But I submit that, just as you gave that wonderful story of how the life was changed with Andreas and his family, that others have that same story. So a lot to reflect on each day for the difference that you're making. Listeners, I want to thank you for tuning into another episode of Workforce Insights, again, powered by Envision More Consulting Group, where we bring your bold visions to life. Thank you for not only participating in this conversation, please do share it. There's so much great work to take place in our nation, and you can be a powerful force behind that. Also, be sure to subscribe. And until the next episode, see you then. Thanks for tuning in to the Workforce Insight podcast, powered by Envision More Consulting Group, where we bring your bold visions to life. Remember to subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more insights on navigating the world of workforce and leadership. Until the next time, be bold, be great, and let's innovate.